Welcome, old viewers and new viewers, to another episode of the Dancing Negotiator with Dr. Cheryl Okoli, DHA. This is the show where you learn all about conflict and its resolution strategies, and also the what and why, the where, the when, the who of conflict. Evidence-based frameworks are introduced. As an example, I also introduced my original mnemonics, like the 5 A's of conflict resolution, and those of other experts as well. I like to reserve the last Friday of each month to have a guest. The third Friday of each month is reserved for story time. So yes, today we will be having story time because we postponed last week to today. So we will be analyzing the final episode of a workplace bullying drama called Sticks and Stones, the 2019 version. We will be analyzing the final episode and the whole drama as well. So I like to have themes for each month. So you might have known, if you've been following us, that the theme for today, or this month, I should say, of April, is all about the business of healthcare. And we've been using a specific framework. So we will not be addressing that today, but come back next month as we continue with that concept. But for today, we will analyze workplace bullying. So you might have recalled that in the month of February, it was all about interpersonal relationships. Now, interpersonal relationships, and when you think about workplace bullying is definitely the destructive arm, that's right, of interpersonal relationships. At that time, I introduced a framework called, or theory, if you will, called the perception theory, and specifically a sub-arm called attribution theory. So what is attribution theory and why is it salient when we talk about interpersonal relationships and yes, in workplace bullying? Basically, the attribution theory, think of it as having 3 domains. First, you must observe a behavior. Then you must believe that the behavior was intentional. And last but not least, assess and analyze if that behavior was internally as an intrinsically motivated or extrinsically as an externally. So internally or intrinsically could be, was it caused by a personality issue? Or extrinsically could be, was it caused by an environmental physical issue of the workplace, or maybe the organization culture? Now, with perception theories, sometimes your perceptions may be accurate and sometimes false. Now, quickly, I want to talk about another theory I mentioned in the previous episodes. And if you've not watched the previous episodes, please feel free to do so. Why do I want to bring up this particular framework by Tripp and Baumel? Because they felt that commonly known conflict resolution strategies framework, some of you may not know it by its name, but it's actually the Thomas Kilmann model, which identifies collaboration, competition, compromise, avoidance, and accommodation as conflict resolution styles. Now, Baumel and Tripp extended that framework. Why? They felt it was not sufficient to deal with destructive behaviors. And they added 3 additional conflict resolution styles, which are destructive in nature. What are they? Exclusion, blocking, and sabotage. So, as we analyze this final episode of this drama, I would like you to see if you can detect instances of exclusion, blocking, and sabotage, and also what your perceptions of what is happening, because attribution theory is used in organizations to assess human behavior. So it's an apt one to apply to our case study, well, our story and drama for today. But before we go into that, I am very cognizant of the fact that some of you watching me or your family members might have been recipients of workplace bullying. So with that in mind, I commend you if you've arrived and you're watching, you've been a recipient and you've showed up. Well done for doing that. There will be some instances that might be poignant, but then again, clap for yourself, tap yourself on the back, for showing up and for viewing this if you're viewing it on the replay as well. So before we start, I want you to get comfortable wherever you are. Preferably, I hope you're seated. Now, plant your feet firmly on the ground because we're going to do a breathing exercise before we embark on this journey. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate what it will look like and then we'll go right into it. Okay, so it's going to be 5 instances of inhaling and exhaling and rolling our shoulders. So it will look like this. So in, so I invite you to close your eyes and join me as we do this 5 times. So the first one, here we go. 3, 4, 5, and I think one more. Now shake it up. Just shake up your hands. Well done. So now let us start on this journey. But before we do that, I want to share my screen. Why? Because I want to invite you to have a look at a visual of what the various characters look like, because it's important to keep them in mind as we journey through this whole episode. So here we have our main character is Thomas, and I hope my screen loads there. And the main character that we have is an individual called Thomas. Thomas right here, let's start at the top here. He is the main character of this drama, Workplace Bullying. So basically the drama takes us on a journey of his work and home life. This is his daughter, Millie, who is deaf. She, unfortunately, is experiencing bullying in her home environment. Over here, we have his wife, Jessie, who is very supportive of him. She's a nurse. And down below here, we'll talk a little bit more about his work environment, and I'll provide a recap of episodes 1 and 2 of the drama. So this here is Thomas. He works in a company called Clayton, and these are his business colleagues. He is the team leader. Now, to be precise, the company is a business company that caters to individuals or clients who need office spaces or accessories as it pertains to offices. Over here is a colleague called Isabel. We have Andy and Becky, and all of them report to this gentleman here by the name of Mr. Chris Carter. Okay. And by the way, for those of you who might be wondering how you can access this drama, you can find it on BritBox, ITV, or YouTube. Okay. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen as we proceed to talk about this some more now. Okay. So what is going on in this episode? High-level overview of episodes 1 and 2 to bring us to today's. What is happening is that his colleagues that I pointed out to you, unfortunately, were exhibiting bullying behaviors that were, I would say, a little bit covert to the onlookers. For example, they had stolen credit for work done by Thomas, the team leader. They sabotaged him, as an example, by not letting him know of changes in the work environment. So as an example, there were changes made to the IT department, but no one told him. And that sabotaged a very crucial presentation to land a deal with a client. Fast forward, on top of all the bullying happening in his workplace, his daughter is being bullied. Back to his workplace, there's a redundancy happening. So you can imagine if you're in a workplace where there's a redundancy happening, people are stressed, on edge, and sadly, some people resort to destructive behaviors. So as this is happening, some of the things that his colleagues were doing, he tried to mention it to his boss. His boss wasn't really receptive. He pretty much tried to stay quiet, but sadly, in due time, he had some outbursts. And the outbursts resulted with his boss, Carter, saying, "You're sick, you need to seek help." So fast forward, the final episode of this drama begins with him arriving at a hospital to see a therapist or counselor. She diagnoses him with depression, prescribes antidepressants, and asks him to take an online course on cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, whether or not that's an accurate diagnosis given to him, that could be debated, but that was his diagnosis. Now, fast forward. He's at home, supposed to be on stress leave, given everything that's been happening at work and on the direction of his boss. He gets a phone call from Isabel. Isabel is one of his colleagues, who in previous episodes appeared to be his friend, but certain behaviors showed that she needed to be watched closely by him. He had thought she could not be trusted. So here she is giving him a ring at home while he's recuperating, checking up on him and asking, when will you return back to work? His response is he does not know, but then she kind of gives the impression, do not let what they're doing to you make you be kicked out from the organization. Now, with such a warning, he definitely, or some might say she was trying to encourage him, but either way, how did he take it? He decided to go back to work. So he gets back to work, and of course, his boss is shocked to see him back so soon. He starts getting some comments from Andy saying things like, "Oh, you're already back. Mental health issues are not usually dealt in a day." Now, he as in Thomas, walks straight to his boss's office and says, "I want to file a complaint of bullying." Now, his boss is taken aback and makes comments like, "Oh, you're beginning to make me look or feel like a school teacher." He wants proof and evidence of the bullying behavior. Thomas tries to tell him about the different instances in the past, from emails, texts, sticky notes, post-it notes that were stuck all over his work environment. The boss, you could see, wasn't truly convinced, but eventually he decided to proceed and involve HR. Now, Thomas goes to a breakout room, seated all by himself, and you can see he's watching the clock tick away. In due time, Andy, one of his teammates, comes into this room where it's only himself and Thomas. Thomas is taken aback and makes comments like, "You shouldn't be here. I'm not supposed to talk to you." And Andy basically sort of starts making comments like, "Who told you? Carter didn't tell me any such thing. How could you report me? I thought we were mates." In due time, Becky comes in, and then a very disturbing scene begins to take place, which is basically tantamount to sexual harassment. And because it's Annie and Becky who are the instigators, and they basically said if he cooperates with what they're asking him to do, they'll stop bugging him forever. He gives in with the first gesture they ask of him. The second gesture, he refuses. And Andy starts making comments like, "How can I trust you? You promised you would do it. How can I follow your lead when you go back on your promises?" So when all this has happened, a liaison between HR and their department comes and says that they're all wanted in the office. Now, Thomas is really not too happy about this. Why? Because that's a breach of protocol. When someone is being bullied and they identify who is bullying them, whether it's alleged or not, these parties need to be separated. So he's feeling threatened and unsafe. But the HR or liaison's response is, I'm paraphrasing, okay? In circumstances like this, when there's bullying, it's better that the air is cleared. That it's more dangerous to have rumors basically permeating throughout the workplace. He's not happy about this, but he just goes along with it. But before they go into the office, Isabel comes out and she's crying, and she's making comments to Thomas, "How could you? I tried to be your friend." And whether those are true tears are yet to be identified. Are they true? Are they crocodile tears? Is she an excellent actor? We don't know. But that's what's happening. So they go into the office, and just pay close attention to this. there in the office, all four of them, Thomas, the team lead, his teammates, Andy, Isabel, and Becky, standing up side by side, facing, looking down at Chris, their boss, and the HR representative. Make note of that. That is not an ideal stance to be when such a delicate matter is being discussed. They should have all be seated, but that's what we see happening right now. So I proceed. Chris starts asking questions, their boss, asking Tom what's happening. But before he gets into detailed questions, Andy pitches in right away, chimes in and says, oh, we had a disagreement before coming in. And Chris is confused. He looks over at Thomas, the team lead, who has filed a complaint of bullying. And Thomas decides to just spill the beans and starts talking about the sexual harassment that was happening. And once he says that, you can see on Chris's face, he's so perplexed. He's like thinking, what's going on with these people? What's happening in this workplace? Those are the kind of like the thoughts going through his mind. And then he looks over, and then Andy and Becky start staring at Thomas as if he's lost it. Becky had a face, an expression of almost like disgust on her face. Like, what on earth is Thomas talking about? So again, Thomas is given an opportunity to provide instances of bullying. He tries again. You could see they're not really very receptive. And then finally, Chris asks Isabel, who is, I go like this, Thomas's friend. Is any of this true? There's silence. You can hear a pin drop. And what is her response? It's all true. And then she makes a comment like, and when she says it's all true, Thomas is smiling. You can see he's feeling, at last, someone's got my back. But the next words out of Isabel's mouth might suggest otherwise. She says, it's true. He has dandruff. And then Thomas looks at him because Becky had mentioned stuff like that. And then she goes on to say, we've tried working with Thomas. He's hard to deal with. And at this point in time, you can see Thomas begins to get upset. His lips are quivering. Now, before I proceed, there was a point in this episode whereby his boss, given the redundancy happened, given that he's seeing that Thomas filing this case of bullying, trying to say he's having a hard time working with his colleagues because of the bullying, the boss himself says, you know what, here are some papers that you could sign. You're saying you're well, you're here. I was holding off on this paper, but since you're saying you're well, maybe you should sign these papers. It will solve all of our problems. So that was a scene that had happened in this last episode. So now fast forward to where we were before I interjected with that. Isabel basically throws him under the bus and says we can't work with him. Thomas is quivering, getting really upset. He has an outburst, he's swearing. During his outbursts, he damages one of his boss's, I guess, prized possessions on his table. And then the boss starts swearing and At one point in time, Thomas, in his rage and everything, ends up on the ground. And of course, everyone's mortified as what's happening. And the boss pretty much says, everyone just leave the room. Everyone let Thomas cool down. And Isabel says, I don't think he should be left alone. Someone should stay with him. And the boss was like, oh yeah, that's right. You stay with him. But before that, he said, Thomas, I need to call someone. What's your wife's phone number? And Isabel had gone over quickly and offered Thomas's wife's phone number, saying that she has the number. So anyway, so they all depart, and all is left in the room are Isabel and Thomas. Thomas, mind you, like I mentioned, is on the ground. As soon as the door shuts, Isabel makes her way towards Thomas and starts talking. She brushes off his cheek because she notices blood. The minute she touches him, he scrambles as if he was electrocuted and separates himself. Talk about polar separation, almost from North Pole to South Pole. He ends up on the other side of the room, shaking, now seated on a chair, and he has a phone in his hand. And Isabella starts talking and starts saying, because he says to her now, you were behind all of this, I can't believe it. And then she admits it and starts giving him instances of how and what she was doing, how she tried to get rid of him because back in the day, and I paraphrase, the caveman days, it was all about survival for the fittest. If someone was a threat, they get rid of them. So that's what she was doing. She thought he was a threat. He should be getting rid of. So as all this is happening, she starts belittling him. Now, worst case, she starts providing racial slurs. And she'll make comments like, if I were to say that, HR wouldn't think that's an issue. But if I were to say this, that you could take to the police. And she basically called him stuff that I will not repeat on this episode or ever in my life. So after all that happens, at one point in time, Carter, the boss, glances into the room, says his wife is here. And before Thomas leaves, he passes on the papers that he had signed at some point during the episode to his boss. The boss says, "You did the right thing," nods, and then they all depart. So he's leaving the office with his wife, telling the wife, of course, is frantic what's happening. As they're driving home, he looks over, he sees a billboard sign, and it says, "Build your future." He gets home, but before they get home, a flash is made of an office scene of his boss looking at the papers that he had signed. What did he sign? Proof to follow. So Thomas arrives home with his wife, starts telling her everything. And guess what? He plays a recording for her. What was his recording? Unbeknownst to Isabel, during that whole altercation in the office, Thomas was recording everything. That was what he was playing for his wife. He emailed the tape to Carter, his boss. He emails a copy to the police and to Isabel. Scene changes. We see the police going to Isabel's house to, yes, arrest her. We see another scene, his boss typing over the computer saying, "I apologize for what happened. All parties involved will be removed from the organization. And I'm sure we can come to some 6 digits agreements for settlement." The wife is saying, "No, he shouldn't make you shut up. You should be able to say what you say. You won't have to say so someone else doesn't have to go through this." Now, at this point in time, there's a scene I must mention that's very crucial to this. At one point in time, when it was just Thomas and his boss in the office, and all of them, sorry, not just him, all of them, when Thomas was given an opportunity to provide proof, he was saying it was bullying, that even if he were to make redundant, he wouldn't get another job. He was almost 40. Who would hire him under the circumstances? It's difficult for him to start his own business. He thought he should have been promoted by that time. So with the boss suggesting the 6-digit figures, he already in his mind is thinking of his family and just the possibilities, what could happen given what has all transpired. So the wife says, "Is it done? Is it done?" At one point, Thomas glances over to his right. There's a book, and the title is Become a Millionaire by Age 40. He smiles and says, "It is done." And that's how the episode ends. Whew. Take a deep breath, everybody. Okay, so now let's have a little bit of chatting as to how we can identify some of the bullying behaviors. I found some of the bullying behaviors, just a lot packed in this final episode and the entire drama itself. Well, because we don't have much time, I see we have only about 6 minutes left for this part of this episode. Let me identify some of them and see what you think, okay? So I identified some definitely instances of sabotage. There was forcing and manipulation of signing the redundancy papers by the boss, saying, "If you just sign it, it will solve all of our problems." Invasion of privacy by Isabel, when she somehow had his wife's phone number. And also, some might even debate this when she called him when he was at home on sick leave. Some might debate that maybe she really did care for him, but some might say she crossed some boundaries there. And then we saw some gaslighting happening when Isabel, Andy, and Becky, during that whole sexual harassment thing going on. And even by Carter himself, at one point in time when Thomas was trying to tell his boss the different proofs and evidence, his boss actually said, is that all real? That struck a chord with me. Why? Because remember I mentioned about the whole perception theory. Some might say, was it false perception on his part? Was it accurate? Is he hallucinating? You know, all sorts of thoughts would go through your mind. So I think that was gaslighting to some extent by his boss as well. And then the breaching of the HR protocol. They should not all have been in the same room, nevertheless have some standing and some seated. And definitely the sexual harassment by his teammates, and then swearing by the boss. And unfortunately, Thomas himself partook of the swearing. He should not have done that. And then last but not least, the belittling and the racial slurs that Isabella partook of at the towards the end of the episode. What did Thomas do well? Well, by filing an official bully report. That was very well done on his part. Second, recorded the entire meeting, especially the portion with Isabel. Now, I know not many people would think about that, given the nature and how emotive and how stressful and high tension that environment and scenario was. But somehow he thought of it and did it. That was well done on his part. Third, reporting to the police, reporting to his wife. And last but not least, the negotiation at the end. So it's almost as if the drama left us on a cliffhanger, because I had mentioned how it ended was, he looked over to his right, saw a book that says, become a millionaire by age 40. And prior to that, his boss had mentioned we could settle on a 6-digit figure. I believe a negotiation process was going to happen. And I strongly believe, again, this is me using my artistic liberty here, that he would indeed get a 7-figure form of the million. And his dream of becoming a millionaire, which was shared in a previous episode by age 40, would come to pass. So I notice we have only 2 minutes left, but before we end this part, I always have a call to action. So for you viewing me live, and for those of you that will view me on the replay, I want to ask you a few questions. What did you learn from the analysis of this drama, from the start to finish? What will you do about it? Do you need to debrief? Perhaps you might need to talk to a family member if you've been a recipient or know someone who's been a recipient of workplace bullying. Do you need to talk to a counselor, HR? Or if you don't feel safe doing any of that, or you don't feel comfortable, please feel free to contact me. You can reach me at Cheryl at shalomeagleswings.care. And I can spend some time with you, listening and providing some recommendations and suggestions. So now, before we end, I'd like you to take a deep breath again, or just once this time. Relax a bit, try your best. Feet plant on the ground, take a deep breath. Out. Roll those shoulders back. Shake it off. And I just want to remind you that you can find me, and I'll invite you to join me next time for another episode of the Dancing Negotiator with Dr. Cheryl Okoli, DHA, same place, same time. Next week, we'll be having a guest join us. And I invite you to come back for that. But I always like to leave my viewers with this thought. Yes, come closer. Remember that you are needed to be a solution in this world. Be the best that you can. And do not rob the world of a precious gem, you. That's right, you are special. Goodbye and have a splendid day.